Hi, this is Vicki. I'm going to show you how I cut, press, and sew the hat tie ends or the straps for the surgical cap for frontline workers. This is the pattern for the hat tie in. You need two of them, and you can either use the pattern to cut them, or if you have a rotary cutter and ruler, you can just use the dimensions that are marked on the pattern, 12¼ inches long by 1 7/8 inches wide. There are two methods given on the instructions to finish the end that's not sewn into the cap, but I also have a shortcut or a cheat that I use so that I don't have to do that extra work of finishing that end. And that is, I usually get the straps or the tie ends cut from a piece of fabric below where I cut the hat band, because this is shorter than the crown piece, which takes up more of the fabric. And I put one end on the very edge of the fabric, which is called the selvage, and that end is essentially already finished, so I don't need a seam there to be turned and flipped and pressed and stitched over. I just stitch to that end and leave it because it's finished. This selvage can have different looks on depending on the fabric. On this one, it's white on one side, and if you have a half yard or a meter or more of fabric, there's going to be one on each side. So either you can get two straps, one next to each other from one edge, or you can get one from each edge. Now, they're not all going to be white. As this one, from the back side it's white, but on the right side it's got the print to it. The print went all the way to the edge there, so it's a little harder to tell. And different pieces of fabric are going to look different. This one is just plain white. Some of them have some printing on them. Like this one, it's got little circles with all the different colors that are in the print. Some of them are going to be the background color of the fabric. Like this one, it's got a little bit of print on one side. Or this one. Now, and if you have only a fat quarter, you're only going to get one edge. So you will have to try, if you want to get both straps with that selvage end, you will have to try and fit that one strap and then another one below it. The other side will be cut on a fat quarter because the fabric is cut down the center line to make the fat quarter. Some of them are a little more difficult to tell, like this one. It's got a little bit of white on the back, so that's how I tell that's the selvage edge. Or this one, you can't tell at all, but that is the selvage edge. It's going to be neater, more densely woven than a regular cut edge on the fabric. And this one, you can see the cut edge is going to fray a little bit from the washing process, whereas the selvage edge, there's no fraying at all. So that's how you can tell the difference in that one. And then this one, sometimes it even has these little furry bits along the edge, but it's still very densely woven between the furry bit and the regular weave of the fabric. So you can trim off those pieces or leave them, it doesn't matter. That edge is not going to fray either. Okay, now for pressing, a couple of tips. I have these things, they're called iron fingers, and because pressing with steam does a much better job, I use the steam in my iron, but the steam tends to shoot out the front toe of the iron and heat up my fingers pretty badly. So I started using these a while ago when they were available. Before that, I was just using an ordinary kitchen dishwashing glove. It's thick, and it will protect your fingers and your whole hand from that very hot steam. I don't recommend the thin blue nitrile gloves that are used in hospitals and whatnot. They're not going to protect your hands any more than from heat any more than they do when you're trying to change out your headlamps at -20 in the wintertime. So the strap in the instructions, to get the press that you need so that all the raw edges are enclosed, The instructions tell you to first fold it in half lengthwise and press that, and that's going to be the final fold, and it also marks the center line. And then you're going to turn in the edges towards that center line, press one, press the other one. So the raw edges are meeting at the center line, and then you refold along that first fold again and press that one more time. And then it's ready to stitch. Another way to do it is if you have one of these things. It's a bias tape maker. The straps are not cut on the bias, but that doesn't matter. All this does is it folds the fabric. So it gives you a little bit of a shortcut because you don't have to do that first fold in half. In fact, if you're using this, you don't want to do that first fold in half. It'll make things more difficult. So this, what it does is it just curls up the fabric into a fold, and then you still press it with the iron. Normally the instructions tell you, because a bias cut would have an angle on here, and that makes it easy to feed in, but doesn't matter. I just feed that corner in. Instead of trying to feed it in straight, I feed in one corner a little bit. I use some kind of pointed object to grip it. My seam ripper or a pin also works. And then the bias tape making tool has a slot down the middle, and you just put your pointed object in there and start shuffling the fabric along and steer it a little bit at the edges. This worked the first time I tried it, and eventually it comes out the narrow end. I have one that's a little bit looser and it's actually easier to feed. It comes out the narrow end with those raw edges folded into the center. So there's still going to be 2 steps to the pressing instead of 3. So then I can just put my iron on top of that strip where it's folded, press it down, pull the tape making tool along as I go. The iron keeps up with it, and it just presses those edges in, and then I can do my final press so that all the raw edges are enclosed. And then it's ready to stitch. Okay, now in order to stitch, I'm going to have to move the camera, so you're going to get a quick bird's eye view of the mess that is my sewing room. Trying not to get hung up in all the cords. Okay, maybe you can see my geranium and my impatiens plant there. And I should have had the sewing machine on. Okay, so I've got a bunch of straps here that I'm ready to sew. And in the instructions that come with the pattern, I also recommend sewing the straps with a slight zigzag. So I've got mine set on a memory. The slight zigzag just gives a little bit of stretch in the stitch, because even though it's not cut on the bias, if it's cut on the cross grain especially, the strap does have some stretch, and also the use of it, all the tying and untying, is putting a lot of stress on those stitches. So my zigzag stitch is a 0.5 millimeter width, which is pretty narrow, and then a standard length of 2.5 millimeters. Okay, so to sew it, that one doesn't have, this one doesn't have a salvage edge, so I do need to finish one end. So that's where I'm going to use method 2. I've pressed it without pressing the end in, so now I'm just going to flip that around, kind of inside out, but the raw edges are still folded in towards that center line press. And actually I need to stitch this one on a straight stitch. And I'm also going to do a little bit of a back stitch. That's going to get flipped and stitched over, so it doesn't matter too much.